I'm joined today by Mr. Ben Kodisang, who's the Chief Executive Officer at Alt Capital Partners. Hello, Ben.
Hello, Chris. Very good to see you and being on the channel.
My pleasure. So, there's a question I want to ask you, and that is in terms of infrastructure developments and more in terms of property investments into underdeveloped or, say, rural areas. Is that something that is a doable, profitable scenario, yes or no? And give me some background, please.
So the short answer is yes. And if you ask me why, I'll probably just take you back to the bigger issue we're all trying to resolve. So what we're all trying to resolve are the triple L's, right? Inequality, poverty, lack of employment, and lack of economic growth. And if we do not address those, I guess the consequences are pretty much what we experienced as a country in July 21. If I can just remind you to the unrest, the looting, and the chaos that resulted over 8 days, where the country lost about 60 billion rands as a result of either looting, property distractions. Most of it was mainly in the urban areas and peri-urban areas, and very little in the rural areas, right? So we know from then that luckily for those investors that were in short, so I'm talking about the property industry at large, mainly REITs, they were able to recover about 32 billion rands from Sesria, which is a fund set up for events such as this. And if we speak today, a lot of those shopping centers that were destroyed have actually been rebuilt into pretty much new. But to rewind back to why did that take place and what can we learn from it from an investment thesis perspective? Because the investment thesis is, should investors or pension funds deploy their money into rural and township areas? So I'm starting by saying yes. Why? Is because if we don't, then we persist with the ills of the past. And if we do, then we start addressing the inequality, poverty, unemployment issue. But what we learned over the time, because over the time we were in the middle of capital raising. So I'll say the question was clearly posed by a lot of the investors to say, is the thesis still sound and do we still have an investment case? So what we said to them from an investment case perspective at the time was looking at the history of South Africa from a spatial perspective. You can argue that apartheid spatial planning resulted in the urban areas being as developed as they are. And the missing middle or the missing part of the spatial development is largely in the rural areas, which still has got a fair amount of our population, and in the townships and peri-urban areas as well.
Right.
So as a result of COVID, we've clearly seen additional people migration, mainly into the peri-urban areas, your remote towns. Some into the major metropoles like Cape Town has been a big beneficiary. And but the small DOPs like Graaff-Reinet has seen significant population growth as a result of migration. And some of the rural areas are also seeing a lot of people that came to the cities now retiring and they're now moving back home. So the demand supply equation, I guess, still points to a very firm imbalance, which means an investment opportunity of creating the necessary infrastructure from malls to schools to hospitals to affordable housing to student accommodation to accommodate this part of the population, right? And in so doing, you are creating jobs, you are reducing poverty, etc. But just to go back to what we learned. So clearly the first thing we learned from an investment thesis perspective is we needed to review our investment process so that we don't just focus on the economic capital case. We needed to start factoring in the social or ESG agenda or the impact agenda into the investment thesis, right?
Right.
So that means from an energy perspective, yes, we have to think about energy security. So thanks to load shedding, we now have to invest in solar, battery, and look at renewable energy as part of our energy mix
Yes.
to just ensure sustainability of energy. Water is a current next crisis, so we do need to think around water harvesting, water usage. Sewer is another one where because municipalities lack infrastructure, leadership, and capital, so we're finding as investors, we have to collaborate, work with them to also respond and answer to the sewer challenges. So there's a lot, I guess, on the environmental side that we need to address. And on the social side, yes, we need to still promote employment equity, still have a bias towards gender, because we're finding that a lot of families are pretty much led by women. So empower a woman, you empower a nation, as the saying goes. So we have to be deliberate then in terms of support for women-owned businesses, in terms of our supply chain. And yeah, and also having to be deliberate around how we think around bringing the community into the ownership of the asset, right? And I'm not talking necessarily actual ownership, but it can be in terms of community having an economic interest. But I'm just saying that the community needs to feel like they own these assets because they are part and parcel, of the security arrangements that we witnessed in July 21. So what do I mean by that? So I'll just point to one development that we're doing in False Arrest because I think it carries a lot of the many examples that we encountered in July 21 that we learn from and that we think we can improve on in terms of going forward. So we found an old shopping center built in the 80s. In the 80s, it was around then government trying to promote black business. So the shopping center was owned by about 33 black shareholders, largely from the community. So those black shareholders were investors or shareholders financed by the Small Business Development Bank, which is now CIFA, and some of them were also retailers, so trading in the space. And you can see how the opportunity arose for us. It was a lack of governance, right? And by that I mean the retailer felt that he or she is an owner, so why should they pay rent? Because they own the shopping center. And clearly, with not enough money being generated from the enterprise, the environment deteriorated. So fast forward 80s to 2022, when the opportunity came to our attention, it was mainly that. It was a very dilapidated infrastructure. So having learned from 2021, we decided to experiment with actually partnering with the black shareholders in terms of equity to do the development. So clearly their contribution was the land and the top structure, even though the top structure was going to be demolished so that we can build new. We clearly understood that they don't have any cash outside of that. So we had to do some clever financial engineering by giving them loans for the top structure, but all done to achieve, I guess, ownership of 51% Reimagine or us and 49% them. So we started by working on governance, which in that case entailed formalizing them into a company. Because then clearly, as an institutional investor, we are not geared to dealing with 33 people around the table, right?
Yeah.
We we need them to be in a company. We need them to have appointed directors. The company must have an MOI with a mandate so that then we deal B2B, which took time. And clearly, with FSCA's requirements of KYC, it was also quite a process, right? Because then we found some of the owners had died along the way, or some of them bank accounts were not up to speed. So anyway, but we had to assist them until we got it right, because clearly governance is also a big part of the G. And then the second thing, after working then with our partners, as we call it, was realizing that we've got a taxi rank next to the shopping center. And one thing that we learned from July 21 is how the taxi industry came to the party to help prevent the destruction, the chaos, help restore order, because as we know, the police intelligence was not quite up to speed with uh, what happened in July 21. But then we needed, I suppose, additional capacity to act as security. So understanding that, then we engaged the Taxi Association, and the conversation was exactly that. How can the association assist in terms of providing additional security in terms of this shopping center that we were doing? The third one took time, but it was chaos at first, which was managing the community as a stakeholder. So it meant working clearly with our partner in terms of the leadership of the community. But before getting there, we had to restore trust and confidence. So what that means is a community, because the shopping center was previously funded by a so-called government, since the funding was a small business development finance, they saw us as being part of government. So we had to first explain that no, we are an institutional investor representing a whole lot of pension funds' monies in terms of what we do. Then, as another interesting dynamic for me was Kelly being detained and interrogated to, I suppose, pass a credibility test. To say, yes, you might look like us, but you're not from here. And then, yeah, I didn't realize that things were literally at that stage. But once we got over that, then the community actually started taking ownership. So clearly, we had to explain how we work. And what I'm proud of in terms of how we did work is we chose a construction company from Pretoria. We worked with these guys for some time now, so they understand how we work. So you'll understand that from a governance perspective, we contract with a construction company because they have to provide the necessary guarantees in case they don't deliver on time, within budget, etc., etc., etc. But what they did as part of executing their mandate, they actually went out of their way to do a skills audit of the community of Vosloorus. That meant finding out how many plumbers are there, electricians, bricklayers, tilers, etc. And then they created pools of work for the community. So fast forward 18 months later, we can actually count the number of jobs that we've created in construction and development, specifically how much has come from the community, but also to start thinking around the youth unemployment issue. We had learnerships actually involved in terms of the project. So we did all this without compromising the economic thesis. The economic thesis says investors at the end of the day need a return. And in property, why is still a stable investment case is that to have a predictable, reliable income stream, we need to anchor it with tenants. So we had very good support from the national tenants. This shopping center in particular is anchored by Boxer. Boxer is actually the one that brought it to our attention. So you could say it was tenant led, which is always a good case. So now fast forward, the community is going to get a 7,500 square meter shopping center in about November. And next week we are doing phase one opening, which is just a Boxer and for racing. And then we've upgraded the infrastructure, we've restored dignity to the community. There's a lot of good vibe and energy. And all this done without construction mafia. And why is because the community and the Taxi Association acted in congruence to providing the security. On top of clearly the Hawks also providing an oversight as part of the business government crime initiative, which I'm proud of. So, Chris, that's my nutshell to say I still believe as investors we need to spend more money in developing infrastructure in rural areas and townships, primarily to address triple evils of inequity, unemployment, and poverty and a lack of growth. And we do this responsibly with impact managers. then we keep the whole system in balance.
Fair enough. Well, I can tell you one thing. I think it's a very inspirational story. I take a lot of. I think it's something that you guys can be immensely proud of, and it's the kind of thing that needs to spread far and wide in our country. And I think that is one of the actual key things to developing this infrastructure for the people and just getting SA Inc. on a much higher and better level for everybody. So well done on that. I really think you guys are doing an extraordinary job. I would have loved to see a before and after picture. We can't show that on this though, but it would be quite nice to see. But congratulations, Joe. Well done. It's an inspiring story, and I think it's certainly worth broadcasting out there and getting more and more of these projects going. Any other comments, or you've certainly said quite a lot today, and I really appreciate that.
Thank you, Chris, and I appreciate your words of encouragement. I will send you the before and after. I'll do it after this.
100% lovely, and I think we can maybe check back in. As you say, the project is going to be coming to fruition around about November, I think you mentioned. So maybe worthwhile then at the time to maybe do a follow-up and then look at the sort of final results and achievement, from that perspective. I think that would be very nice for us to do.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate that.
Fantastic. Ben, thank you for your time. Appreciate it. And we'll certainly continue this engagement.
Thank you, sir.